Hello, my name is Tyler Garman, and I'm going to be teaching you how to implement the flood fill operation from like many paint programs into Gamemaker Studio 2. So, the bit of background: the breadth first search algorithm has many uses, and like the flood fill operation is an easy example of how it can be used. But there's lots of different ways you can use it. So hopefully you can take what you learned here and use it, on other scenarios. But for this tutorial, you're just going to learn a basic flood fill operation on a DS grid. This operation works by replacing like a starter position with a new color and then checking adjacent squares or pixels if they're the target color, then adding them to a queue and then just processing them all together in a non-recursive iterative way. So first of all, the requirements are, well, Gamemaker Studio 2 of course, and ideally an intermediate understanding of the Gamemaker language, and like programming concepts like data structures are very helpful. So to set this up, we're going to create a new object. I'm just going to call it like object fill, and get to the first step. I'm just going to create the grid that we will like fill, and then just like display it to the to the window. So we're going to be using DS grids for this. So I'll just call it my grid equals DS grid create, and I'm going to create a width and height of 15, just like for this example. So an important thing about the DS grids is you always have to delete them when you're done using them, so that they don't eat up like memory and cause memory leaks. So just create a new like cleanup event and just type DS grid destroy. I'm not spelling things right. DS grid destroy my grid. So there we go. We have our grid. Now just to fill the grid, go back to the create event. And we're just, like, there's lots of different ways you can fill the grid. For this example, I'm just going to fill them randomly. So I'll just say so I'll just go through, loop through each value and assign just a random color out of like maybe white or red. So I'll say for var x equals 0, and I'm using capital X so it doesn't get confused with Gamemaker's default x that's assigned to like all objects. So x is less than ds grid width x plus plus. So this is going to be looping through the rows, and for the columns, we can just pretty much copy this and change it. So just change x to y and width to height. Just write columns. So in this loop, I'm just going to say my grid x, y. So this is how you access grids. You just type, it's very similar to how you'd access an array, except that you have this pound or like hashtag symbol, and then x and y in like the first and second position for like. So then you set that to choose. Choose just takes like two values and just randomly decides between both of them. So I'm going to use colors for this. So I'll use the color constants for white and red, C white and C red. Okay, so now that we have created the grid and filled the grid, the third step is going to be drawing the grid. So create a new draw event, and for this we're pretty much just going to use a similar loop just like we did in the create event, but we're just going to change it up. So we're just going to draw like first we're gonna get the color of the individual pixel, and then we're just going to draw like a square. So draw set color, then access the grid the same way we accessed it before. So, and then draw a rectangle. I'm going to draw this at a bit of a offset, just by like 5 pixels from the origin. So then x times 32, so they are 32 pixels wide when they're drawn. and this is y5 plus y times 32. Now for the second position, for the x and y, I'm just going to do pretty much the same thing, except that I'm going to add 1 to the x, so it's like the next position over. You could just also just add plus 32. That would work just fine. So y plus 1 times 32. Then for the final argument for this, I'm just going to say false. That just says like it is a filled rectangle and not a outline. So now we have that. We're going to want to go into our default room and add the object, and then just click run. And if all went correctly, you should see something like this. Now it may look a little different, but it probably won't, because we didn't randomize the so we didn't set a random seed, so it'll probably look exactly like this. So now that we have that, we can start working on our we can start implementing the flood fill algorithm. So step 4, we're going to create the script. I'm just going to call it flood fill. The arguments are just going to be like the grid for that you just are going to fill, and then like the starter position x and y. So I'll just write that out here. So since Gamemaker uses the very strange thing where arguments are set as like variables, like argument 0, argument 1, I'm just going to, just for sake of like readability, set some of these values. So target x equals argument 1. And I'm just naming this my grid again, just so it's more like identical. And it's just doing that because we haven't set them yet. So step 5, we're going to create the queue. So the queue is used so that it's basically like a first in first out structure. We just put in the values that we want to check when we need them. So dsq create, and that has no arguments, so just call that I'll just call that like fill queue. Now DSQs also have to be manually destroyed, but we can just put that like at the end of the script, so just like that. DSQ destroy fill queue. Okay, so another important thing is like the fill color is constant. You can set that as an argument if you want. I'm just gonna set that as like toColor equals C green, so you'll just be able to do that, but you can do whatever you want. I'm gonna include some code so it'll check what the current color of the position is, so that it'll just fill just that color. So to get that, I'll say to from color is, and then just access the my grid at target x and targets y. So, but then the important thing is to worry about is that if the from color is equal to the to color, it will actually cause problems because it won't know when to stop. So we're gonna have to include some code that says if from color equals to color, then just return, because that's not what we want and it's not going to fill anything. Okay, so now we have our queue. Let's move on to step 6, where we will begin the loop. So to start off our loop, it's pretty much just like we just check until the queue is empty. So while dsq empty fill queue, and then during the queue, to start the queue off, we're gonna have to put in our first values, which we can use with dsq nq. And for this, we'll just put in like the target x and target y because that's the starting position. And the way I'm going to put it in is, since there's no sort of like position class in Gamemaker, I'm just going to put in each value x and y like right after another as like separate positions in the queue. This works just fine as long as you just don't put anything else in the queue. So target x, target y, and just always remove two things. So we just put in the two first things. Now we're in the while loop. We can set the current position, which I'll just call tx, to dsq dq. So that just takes the first value that was put in, which would be target value x here. So dsq dq. And then we can take the second position, which is y, and call it ty. Then we should ideally check if it is inside of the like grid width, so that it doesn't go outside. So we can just check if tx is greater than or equal to 0 and tx is less than ds grid width my grid. So this is checking if the x is inside the parameters, or the bounds, and then I can check if ty is greater than or equal to 0 and tx is ty is less than ds grid height my grid. Okay, so then we have that. So in here it's got to be inside. So now we can move on to step 7, which will be when we replace the color of the current's position. So that's really pretty simple. We just access the current position, migrate a tx and ty, and just set that variable to color. Set a comment there. Then we have to check the sides. So like the left, right, up, and down, and see if they are the color that we want to change. So then we can add them to the queue. So for that, I'll just say if my grid tx plus 1 ty, so this is checking to the right, checking if it's equal to from color, then dsq, let me just make a new line, dsq nq fill q tx plus 1 and ty. Then we're going to want to repeat this for all the remaining sides. So I'll just change this to ty plus 1. So this is going to be pointing down. Make sure to change it in both positions. Then I'll do just tx minus 1. So that's going to the left. Then I will check ty minus 1, which is looking up. Okay, so then this will just keep going until they are no longer the color. So then we are actually done with the script. So we can close that, go back to our object, and for step 8 we're going to actually implement the execution of this. So I'm going to go to create a new step event and just check like a mouse check. So if mouse check button pressed, it'll be left. So this is just if it presses the mouse left button. It's going to set the like mouse position, or like it's going to have to calculate the mouse position on the grid, because then it will like know which area you're actually pointed on. So var mx is going to be equal to floor. So we're going to floor the mouse x divided by 32. But then since we added that little bit of padding with the 5 in the draw event here, so it's drawn a little bit extra, we're gonna have to subtract that here, and then divide it by 2, or divide it by 32, so it has the exact position, the integer. And we can just repeat that for the y. and run our script, flood fill my grid mx my. Okay, then we are good to go. So if you run the project, you should find, it's taking a little bit of time. Okay, so here we go. It actually does look completely the same. So if you click on any of these areas, it'll just like turn green. There are definitely improvements that can be made on this. As you might be seeing here, there's a bit of out of bounds rating, but that's just because we're not checking all of the possible combinations. That I just added in just because it's making it a little bit more confusing, and this works just fine. So if everything worked correctly, it should be looking just like this. So then there you go. Congratulations, you have made a flood fill operation in Gamemaker. You could use this for lots of different things like pathfinding or like area checking, just all sorts of different things that involve like a grid and just finding all possible like connected area. And there's different ways you could edit it too. Like this is a very simple example that just uses solid colors. You could include like a tolerance, so it checks like if colors are similar enough. That's a bit more complicated. So yeah, you could just tweak it depending on whatever you need it for. And thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Just send me a message, or my contact information is in the description below. So thank you.